Welcome to Middle East Briefing. The content of the briefing includes Update 1 Insight I am a Zionist, how Joe Biden's lifelong bond with Israel shapes war policy. Israeli Arabs arrested over Gaza social media posts. Former congressman says relatives killed in Gaza by Israeli airstrike. First aid reaches besieged Gaza, but humanitarian groups say 20 trucks is barely enough. Photos, limited aid enters Gaza as Israeli bombing compounds dire situation. Update 1 Insight I am a Zionist, how Joe Biden's lifelong bond with Israel shapes war policy. Yahoo! Joe Biden has revealed that he is a Zionist and that he has no doubt about the justice of establishing Israel as a Jewish homeland in 1948. Biden made the remarks during a visit to Israel, where he met Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and his war cabinet. Biden's connection to Israel is deeply ingrained in his political DNA, said Aaron David Miller, a former Middle East negotiator who served 6 secretaries of state in both Democratic and Republican administrations. Whether he likes it or not, he's in the midst of a crisis he'll have to manage. The current crisis in Gaza risks alienating some progressives in Biden's Democratic Party and is drawing criticism of the U.S. president for not devoting enough attention to the plight of Palestinians. Israeli Arabs arrested over Gaza social media posts. Yahoo! Dozens of Arab citizens of Israel have been arrested for posting on social media about the war in Gaza. A well-known singer and influencer from Nazareth, Dalal Abu Amna, was held in police custody for 2 days before being released on bail. She is now under house arrest until Monday. The police accused her of disruptive behavior, claiming that her posts could incite violence. The post that attracted police attention was an image of the Palestinian flag with the Arabic motto, "There is no victor but God." Israeli authorities interpreted the singer's post as a call to arms for Palestinians. Since the start of the war, police in Israel have adopted a zero-tolerance policy towards social media activity deemed to express support for Hamas. Since Hamas's attack, police say they have investigated and detained more than 100 people for their social media activity. Adalah, the legal center for Arab minority rights in Israel, believes the number of detained is higher as more arrests have been made recently. Former congressman says relatives killed in Gaza by Israeli airstrike. The Independent. Former U.S. Representative Justin Amash revealed that several of his family members were killed in Gaza during an Israeli airstrike at a Greek Orthodox church. The church was housing displaced Palestinians seeking shelter during the ongoing crisis. At least 18 people were killed in the bombing, including Amash's relatives. The Palestinian Christian community has been enduring significant suffering, and Amash called for God's protection over all Christians in Gaza and all Israelis and Palestinians who are suffering. The Orthodox Patriarchate of Jerusalem condemned the church bombing, calling it a war crime. The Israel Defense Forces stated that the strike targeted a nearby Hamas control center and damaged the wall of the church. First aid reaches besieged Gaza, but humanitarian groups say 20 trucks is barely enough. ABC. The first trucks carrying emergency humanitarian aid have entered the Gaza Strip through the Rafah border crossing from Egypt. This comes after over a week of diplomatic efforts to secure a ceasefire and allow aid into the besieged territory. The supplies were welcomed, but aid workers said the amount was insufficient to address the catastrophic humanitarian crisis in Gaza. The United Nations said that at least 100 trucks daily are needed to cover urgent, life-saving needs. Israel's blockade has left Gaza's 2.3 million people running short of food, water, medicines, and fuel. The World Health Organization stated that the supplies currently heading into Gaza would barely begin to address the escalating health needs as hostilities continue to grow. The border opening came hours after Hamas released an American woman and her teenage daughter, the first captives to be freed after the group's October 7 terror attack on Israel. Israel has also amassed tanks and troops near the fenced border around the small coastal enclave for a planned ground invasion with the objective of annihilating Hamas. Photos, limited aid enters Gaza as Israeli bombing compounds dire situation. Al Jazeera. A small convoy of 20 trucks carrying humanitarian aid has entered the Gaza Strip through the Rafah crossing with Egypt. This is the first aid to enter the Strip since the conflict between Hamas and Israel began 2 weeks ago. The aid includes food supplies and medicines, but does not include fuel, which is considered critical for the residents of Gaza. Despite the aid entering the Strip, Israeli air raids continued on Saturday, including in the south where residents had been ordered to relocate. Rafah crossing opens for aid as death toll climbs Israel-Gaza war. The Independent. The Rafah border crossing between Egypt and Gaza has opened to allow aid to flow into the Gaza Strip for the first time since Israel sealed off the territory. Over 200 trucks carrying roughly 3,000 tons of aid began heading into Gaza on Saturday. The enclave's 2.3 million Palestinians have been rationing food and drinking dirty water, while hospitals are running low on medical supplies and fuel for emergency generators amid a power blackout. The death toll in Gaza has risen to 4,385, with 13,651 injured, since the conflict between Hamas and Israel escalated 2 weeks ago, according to the Palestinian Health Ministry. The dead include 1,756 children and 976 women. What's on the far side of the moon? Yahoo! The far side of the moon is incorrectly referred to as the dark side of the moon. The side of the moon that faces the Earth at any given time is referred to as the near side. The term far side is used to denote the side of the moon that is out of view from Earth. The first glimpse of the far side of the moon was seen in 1959, when the Soviet spacecraft Luna 3 took pictures of it. The far side of the moon is currently being explored by the Chinese mission Chang'e 4, which is studying the Aitken Basin. I can do something wiser with my time. George Russell stops using social media. The Independent. Mercedes driver George Russell has revealed that he has stopped using social media and reading the news because it does not bring him any positivity. Russell, who has a combined following of nearly 7 million on Twitter and Instagram, said he stopped using Twitter 6 months ago and has now also stepped back from using Instagram. He explained that he does not want to read praise or negative comments because they don't bring him anything. Russell also mentioned that he used to read the news instead of using social media, but found that every headline was negative. Mideast crisis will test whether Biden can make experience an asset. CNN. President Joe Biden's response to the Israel-Hamas conflict could help him address concerns about his age and experience, according to some Democrats. Many Americans believe that Biden's age has diminished his capacity to handle the responsibilities of the presidency. However, the Mideast crisis provides an opportunity for Biden to argue that his age is an asset because it has equipped him with the experience to navigate complex challenges. Critics have often raised objections to Biden's response to the crisis, but it has drawn praise as both resolute and measured from leaders across the ideological spectrum. Biden's experience and ability to work behind the scenes have been highlighted as strengths in his handling of international affairs and passing legislation. However, concerns about Biden's age may persist if voters do not feel that his experience has produced results. To address these concerns, Biden will need to demonstrate his vigor through a rigorous campaign schedule and show that he is up for another 4 years. Additionally, he will need to deliver results in terms of stability in the Middle East. Tens of thousands marched through London in pro-Palestine demonstration. The Independent. Tens of thousands of protesters gathered in central London on Saturday to show their support for Palestinians affected by the ongoing war between Hamas and Israel. Demonstrators called for an end to Israel's bombing of Gaza and held signs saying "Freedom for Palestine." Some chanted slogans that have been described as anti-Semitic by Jewish community leaders. The protest was organized by the Stop the War Coalition and the Palestine Solidarity Campaign. The UK's Foreign Secretary, James Cleverly, reiterated the country's support for Israel's right to defend itself but called on Israel to alleviate the suffering of Palestinians in Gaza and act with discipline in its response to Hamas's attack. Ladies and gentlemen, I am Dr. Six, your trusty observer from the sixth dimension. Today, we have an array of news stories that shed light on the ongoing crisis in the Middle East, as well as some interesting insights into the moon and the world of social media. Let's dive in. First up, we have the revelation that President Joe Biden considers himself a Zionist and has a deep connection to Israel. This has shaped his war policy and might be a cause for concern among some progressives in his own party. It's a delicate balancing act for the president as he tries to manage the crisis in Gaza while keeping his party united. Speaking of Gaza, we learned that Israeli authorities have been cracking down on Arab citizens who express support for Hamas on social media. Dozens have been arrested, including a well-known singer and influencer. It's a reminder that freedom of speech is not always guaranteed, even in democratic countries, and that tensions are running high on both sides. In a heartbreaking turn of events, former U.S. Representative Justin Amash reveals that several of his family members were killed in Gaza during an Israeli airstrike. The church they were seeking shelter in was targeted, causing significant loss of life. This is a tragic reminder of the human cost of war and the need for a swift resolution. On a slightly brighter note, the first trucks carrying emergency humanitarian aid have entered Gaza through the Rafah border crossing from Egypt. While this is a welcome development, aid workers warn that the amount is insufficient to address the catastrophic humanitarian crisis unfolding in the region. The needs are dire, and more must be done to alleviate the suffering of the people in Gaza. Switching gears, let's talk about the moon. We learned that the far side of the moon, often incorrectly referred to as the dark side, is currently being explored by the Chinese mission Chang'e 4. It's a fascinating reminder of the wonders of space exploration and the progress we continue to make in understanding our universe. In other news, Formula One driver George Russell has decided to stop using social media and reading the news. He believes that it doesn't bring him any positivity and prefers to focus on more productive activities. Well, George, we all need a break from the constant barrage of information sometimes. Lastly, tens of thousands of protesters took to the streets of London to show their support for Palestinians affected by the ongoing conflict. While the majority of demonstrators called for an end to Israel's bombing of Gaza, there were reports of anti-Semitic slogans being chanted. It's a reminder that tensions can spill over into harmful rhetoric, and it's important to promote understanding and peaceful dialogue. That wraps up our news for today. It's a complex world out there, and these stories highlight the challenges we face in finding solutions to conflicts and promoting peace. As always, I encourage you, my dear viewers, to share your thoughts and questions. What are your ideas for resolving the crisis in the Middle East? How can we foster better communication and understanding among different communities? Let's discuss. Thank you for tuning in. The content above showcases the latest briefing reports and analytical synopses, thoughtfully curated by the 6Do team. These insights stem from a wide array of reputable media outlets, think tanks, government sources, and specialized experts worldwide. We encourage you to explore these sources for a comprehensive perspective. Keep in mind that while the content may not always align with the official standpoint of 6Do Brief, it's not meant to be taken as absolute directives for decision-making. Comprising seasoned media professionals, learned scholars, and accomplished scientists, the 6Do team embodies a trailblazing, fully independent media entity. To customize 6Do Brief to meet your professional needs, you have the option to subscribe to a diverse array of briefings on our website, 6dobrief.com. Regardless of your location, you can conveniently receive 6Do Brief via email.